pledge allegiance to the flag, America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everyone. We're going to, by the way, thank you for the sheets. It was getting a little hard seeing the screen the other night, so that is very appreciated. We're going to be doing special revenue funds, debt service, capital projects fund, and the electric and gas funds tonight. Mr. Minner.
Okay, just to correct for a second, since Mr. Maudlin's last day is Friday, I secretly changed the schedule on you real quick. I wanted DC here for basically his department budgets. So what we'll do tonight is we'll hit the special revenue stuff, all those little transfer funds, which we'll probably zoom through in about 2 minutes, and then we'll hit the enterprise funds that are managed by DC. So we'll hit water, sewer, wastewater, solid waste, stormwater, and fleet services. And then on Tuesday, we come back, finish up with electric, gas, health, and a couple other things. So we'll get started. I think tonight, especially as we start off in the CRAs and the discretionary gas tax stuff and the capital projects, we kind of see more impact on the negative side from COVID, and where we were projecting some decreases in sales and gas tax monies. You really only saw it to the tune of about $500,000 in the general fund, and with the other increases and changes, it was almost a little bit of a wash. But you see it as we strategize into the next years for capital improvement projects. And also some good and bad news, because we see some really great growth and then a little bit of a question mark of how that growth will continue beyond 21. So that's kind of the quick overview. So we'll start out with the Greater Leesburg CRA. The Greater Leesburg CRA saw about $24,000 of additional growth. I got to get used to this thing too here. That this year, so it was up. So that's a nice thing. And essentially, on this slide, so there we go. On this slide over here, we show pretty much how the CRA spends its money. About $554,000 is what we bring in, and those expenses break down to the annual payment that we share with the CDC. That's $280,000. The debt service that we have, which was on the initial Main Street and 27 Gateway project, we transferred in $74,000 will go to grants and aids to help with facilitate the sod, landscape, and housing grants. We'll also be recommending spending $100,000 of the new revenue to start the design on the Canal Dixie Gateway concept, which came to us from the master plan that we just finished. And that pretty much wraps up the downtown CRA. When we get into the downtown CRA, also has about $525,000 in reserves. So when we get into capital improvement projects, we'll talk about that a little bit more. Any questions on downtown? The Carver Heights CRA, another positive growth in this fund. It grew by about $100,000 this year. And that breaks down into what we do with the Resource Center. So about $346,000 of that is spent on operating, or 32.5 is the operating expenses. This line you see here is our operating expenses for the Resource Center. The debt service is paying back the electric fund for the construction of a portion of the construction of the teen center. And then with excess revenue, the 217, we're recommending the allocation towards the teen center construction to help cover with professional service costs. And that helps put together, we'll talk about that a little bit more in the capital improvements projects budget. We've got about 2.9 that you can stash away for the teen center project. And that wraps up Carver Heights.
On the Carver Heights, So it looks like even after this 140,000, that appears to be the kind of go forward excess. Is that correct?
The 104. I think we weaved that in there already.
The 140 reserved for future. Or am I looking at the wrong thing?
Yes, the draft reflected the 140,873 going into reserve, but then we got the July 1 estimates for the ad valorem. So the 217,591
Incorporates the 140.
is the new,
Oh, that's
reserve.
okay. Sorry, I was.
Yeah, it's,
Yeah.
it changed.
So given that, so I mean, I think conservatively, you're looking at 200 a year, even if you had a decrease next year. Should we be looking at like the next project and to consider bonding that out while interest rates are low?
I think that's something you can probably look at. I don't think the Carver Heights CRA right now, is ready to talk about another bond on a major project unless you want to bond some of that out for the teen center construction project. If we get creative, knee-jerk reaction, I can't think of anything right now that you would want to bond for it in that fund.
Well, and I can't either. I think that maybe over the next year is the time to start having those discussions about it, because we don't want to get in the situation where we let the cash build up too large, because we're not allowed to do that.
I think the recommendation here we've done as well. I think we're covering our debt on resource, and then what spare cash we have, we're investing in teen center. And so I don't think that leaves us, and even if we see a major crash in the CRA, in the Carver Heights CRA, I don't see where it won't affect the most important things, which would be operation of the teen center and covering the debt. So I don't see us going out on a limb.
Okay.
So Al, are we saying that the CRA is going to cover the operation of the teen center?
I'm sorry, Commissioner.
Are we saying the CRA is going to cover the operation of the teen center?
Yes. Oh, no. The partnership with the Boys and Girls Club will cover that.
Okay.
Our engagement that we did with the MOU with Boys and Girls Club, the city's on the hook for the construction and the capital, and Boys and Girls Club will be on the hook for operations.
And I guess I'm kind of hearing what Commissioner Roebuck is saying, and if we got $200,000 be there next year, year after that, should we not have the Carver Heights community thinking, planning on what the next project will be, so we can come out, whether it's next year or not, to say, hey, this is the next project, as opposed to losing a year without having any planning? Because right now, from my understanding, I don't know, Ken, have you guys even been talking about another project other than the teen center? Because I don't know the community. I haven't heard anybody from the community say.
We've talked about some major ones.
You got some.
Which are multi-million-dollar ones, and
All right.
and bonding $200,000 or holding that aside to cover that. The project's not going to quite get it. But
Okay.
I don't think you go wrong with this plan. Because that 217 is essentially sticking away for unaccounted for monies that we think will come up with the teen center. They may or may not happen, and I think you can easily shift those funds whatever the next impact comes.
Okay.
And I think with all the CRAs, there's probably, and I'll talk, when we hit the next 44127 CRA, talk about a little bit of a concern about the major jump we saw this year and then what happens in 22.
Okay.
So I don't think bonding in that fund right now is the right time. If we want to squirrel a little bit of a way, then maybe peel that 140 that was new. And let me explain new. When we did the original estimates on the budget and got the budget out, that was before the tax assessor got the July 1 estimates out to us. When the July 1 estimates came out and final, those assessed values were way higher than we estimated. So it's a good problem to have. So we took that spare cash, which is different in your books, and allocated it in different spots. So with that, let me jump to the one that I really think crystallizes the concern that staff has moving forward. Fiscal year 21 for the 44127 CRA is a bunker year. I mean, it is humongous. 58% growth. So you are literally going from $800,000 in revenue to 1.2 million in revenue. So where does this money go? We're recommending just typical small operating expenses. The debt service is on that $15 million note. We're recommending sticking 50 grand into the facade sign and housing grant program, which is a small amount. And then that remaining cash, we say, put it in the bank and hold on to it so we can finance that balloon note. So let me show you this next chart. In the audience, I apologize. But where we're at is what this chart shows. Let me see if I can get the cursor over here. This column is our total debt payments. So this is our fund balance right now in the 44127 CRA. It's about 1.2 million. These numbers represent the annual debt payment, which retires in 2036. And it runs from, it was a balloon note. So our initial years were 150, 175. It kind of sneaked up to us to about, this number is 498, so 500. Next year, our debt payment, with 21 is next year, is 500. But then in 22, it goes up to 890. So almost $900,000. And then it stays that way till it retires. So that's where the balloon hits us. So what this arrow is showing is the anticipated revenue. So last year we brought in about 734,000. This year we're bringing in that 1.2 million. So that's a 59% increase, which deserves an exclamation point. Okay, but there's a big question about what happens in these commercial districts. And mind you, the 44127 CRA is those two corridors which are highly commercial. So we've seen really great commercial growth the last several years, and this year, pre-COVID, January 1, when the assessor has to have his numbers out, you saw great growth. That 59% growth in that area is awesome. If that was going to stay that way, and we knew we were going to be taking in the $1.2 million consistently, then the recommendation would be, hey, you've got your debt coverage. Yay. Remember when we first started this, we were really concerned about how we do the debt coverage. We got with Jim. Jim did the recalibration of the increment. That helped the increment. So those actions we took were really great. And but for COVID, we'd probably be whistling a tune right now. So COVID's here. There's concern. We've seen huge unemployment. That's going to hit the district. And the big one there is probably the mall that we need to be concerned about with how that's impacted. So what this chart then says is, okay, we had a great year at 59% for 21, but what happens if we totally crash and we have to go back to what we were before this year, which would be a 37% decrease? I think that's a draconian number. I like to hope to think it's draconian, thinking that that's crying wolf, but you never know. So I took that number, I stuck it in the chart, and then saw if we can still cover our debt. And the answer to that is, if we only have the one bad, and that's not the word choice there, if we only have the one bad year, then we go back with our assumption of 5% growth, then it smooths out, and ultimately the fund works, and that fund will be able to take care of the debt as it was originally designed to do. So the good news is we're seeing great growth. The bad news is I think there is a little bit of a COVID cloud to see how the economy responds in the next 7 months when the assessed numbers for 22 come back around. So the best thing to do there is to sit on that cash. Because the number one priority is payment of the debt.
Is there any way to lower the interest payments on this bond?
Refi the bond? Did we do that? I don't know if we...
We refunded that a while back. I can't remember exactly what the rate on that is, but we've got a pretty good rate on it right now.
Okay, but I'm wondering if it's gone any lower with all this going on.
It's always a possibility.
Okay, can we check on that and see? Because maybe we can save some money that way as well.
Two things, two notes on that. A, we'll take a look at it. B, my guess is that the trade-off is going to be the lower debt payment versus extending that term.
Right, right.
So,
But
well,
you don't know until you look at
I'll have
it.
Jim take a peek. What do you
Yeah,
got?
we refunded that in 16, and it was at 2.59%.
Okay.
Well,
So-
pretty soon they're gonna be paying us, right?
Yeah. So that's,
I doubt that.
those are your CRAs, and that COVID concern is really there for the 44127 CRA. I'm hoping that this chart is, like I say, overly dramatic. Hopefully, the setback will be a blip. But because we don't want that debt payment leaking out into any funds, and we want to keep it in that CRA, the best action to do for hopefully only one more year is to see what January 21 brings for fiscal year 22. So that wraps up the CRAs. Any questions there?
Are the reserve balances in this, did I miss it? I was trying to understand the reserve balances. You referenced 500,000 for the first one.
I don't have them in that chart. I have them in another chart. The reserve balance in the 44127 CRA is this number right here, 1.226 million. I didn't put the reserve balance of the downtown CRA in this portion of the presentation. That number's 512,000.
Okay.
And the reserve in Carver is like 250 grand.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so into discretionary sales tax. This is where we probably see the biggest hit. You see that we are projecting a 28% decrease in discretionary sales tax. The range, we started seeing decreases after COVID, so we kind of, it's in the rear, April, May, June, July. So we started seeing our first decrease in May. Cities ranging 15 to 20, 25%. So we tried to go a little more conservative and go 28, and essentially when we reduced it to 28,000, what you see happen is that revenue drops off from about 2.225 million to the $1.62 million number. And what that does then is whatever capital monies that we had after we took care of existing debt and equipment purchases, which ranged in the neighborhood of half to $750,000 that we put into the general fund, is not there. So we don't have DST money for new capital projects this year. So DST becomes, we pay our leases, we do our debt service, and then we purchase our items, our capital items for equipment. And then once we do all those things, there's no more DST money. And that number, again, that $500,000 to that 750, we have projected to keep down because sales tax numbers just aren't where they need to be if you want to be conservative.
Is there any way that we can get some of the under 500,000 county size money, the discretionary money, to help replace this in the city since it's a general loss?
No, because the way the way that penny sales tax is broke up, it's split into thirds.
Mm-hmm.
So a third goes to the school board, a third goes to the county, and a third goes to the cities, and then that third is divided amongst the cities.
But couldn't we as Leesburg apply for some of those funds right from the federal government?
The CARE Act, is that where you're headed?
Yeah.
To replace the DST? I don't know the answer to that.
Because they are
Probably
making money
no.
available for towns and cities.
We'll double check on that.
Thank you. I mean, it's worth a try, and I'm not worried about the county or the other cities. I'm worried about Leesburg.
I got you.
Thank you.
Yep. So with that's the discretionary sales tax fund for 21. Okay, and then gas tax, a little bit of the same. Again, we projected a 33% decrease in gas revenues due to COVID. And what that reduction did was create it so that we had to cancel our road surfacing and sidewalk projects so that we could take some of that money, shift it into the general fund, and cover other obligations that can be used for gas tax monies. So we see, you see the decrease from 827 to the 556,000, and then we didn't get to street paving this year, so this 407 is actually part of this 827, so that makes up your budget revenues for 21, and then you go and turn it on and spend it on street lighting at $650,000 and other miscellaneous street maintenance qualifying projects, about 314. So that's how we recommend spending your gas tax monies. Any question on gas tax? All right, then we go into the building fund. The building fund, pretty typical. The big accomplishment there in the building fund is the reduction in permit fees. Our personnel costs remain pretty consistent. The difference being the one capital item that the building official asked for was some new software upgrades in about $95,000. So our overall scheme that we came up with in the building department to meet the new legislative directives coming out, which basically stipulates you cannot maintain more or possess more than the average of the last 4 years of your operating cash on hand. For us, that number is about 600 grand. So we're sitting right now on 2.4 million. We came in and you guys approved about a $300,000 or so worth of improvements for other hardware and software to help with processing paperwork and permits and these type of things. So that expenditure brought our capital fund down, or our reserve fund down to about 2.1 million. So with the operating costs plus the capital costs, we had come to you a couple of months ago and said, hey, let's do a major fee reduction and let some of that cash matriculate into our building fund to A, help grow economy in bad time, reduce fees, and then let the excess funds be returned to the users who are using the fund now. So we came up with this projection, and we had a deficit spending plan of about $325,000 or so a year for the next several years, and then about fiscal year 24 or 25, you actually get below your spending requirement. This chart was updated, so this little chart, let's see, get my cursor over here. This chart was the one we showed you when we reduced the fees. This chart was the one we updated to show where the reduction is based on the fiscal year 21 request. And essentially what we did was we kicked up crossing this line one fiscal year. So you're looking at 1, 2, 3, probably 3.5 fiscal years really before you need to reconsider, will we need to increase our rates? Will growth cover that rate increase? So going out probably in the fiscal year 22 and 23 is really when we need to start watching our capital expenses. But also the big question is that chart was done with only 3% growth. And that's what we saw, less villages growth, that's what we saw this year pretty close. So I still believe the recommendation we gave you on lowering the fees as much as we did and letting that cash spend off and deficit spend in that fund for the next couple years was the right plan. Any questions on the building fund? Okay, moving into the housing fund, nothing significant to report here. Any questions?
Ms. Paul Simmons, dollars going?
Yes. So basically this budget is operation and maintenance and getting the Miss Paul Simmons apartments fixed up, rented, that type of thing. All right, our next fund is our debt service fund, which is just a clearinghouse fund, if you will. We take funds from the general fund. It's required that we put it in a debt service fund, and then we pay the debt. Any questions on that? That's the shell game required by state law. Capital Projects Fund. I think we'll have a little discussion now. This is probably the big one, and where we see the stuff. The stuff meaning the impacts from COVID and where we're at. This year, we are only going to recommend 3 major projects to work on. Those being a request for additional funding for the Aquatic Center, 2, to spend funds to start 2 other projects that come out of the master plan that we did for downtown. One is the design for the 2nd and 4th Street plazas, and 2, which we already talked about, was design for the Canal and Dixie intersection. So first, let me jump up to the pool. The pool, we started out with an allocation of about $4.35 million. To date, we have remaining about $3.6 million. That $400,000 difference is basically 2 major expenses. 1, purchasing the Magnolia Street apartments, and 2, contracting and allocating the engineering fees to design the facility. So what that leaves us with is this number, which is the $3.6 million for construction. We are about 97% design complete and this close to getting the project out to bid. That phase we'll bring back the final design to get your feedback, to get your stamp. I believe the Recreation Board has seen it. We're about 90% design complete. They love the plan. Once we get it ready to hit the send button on procurement, we'll bring it to the commission for your review. Our estimate is that construction cost will be in the neighborhood of $5 million. So that leaves us a difference of about $1.3 million to get it funded. Now, I think we have a lot of different options. We've done the bid package with multiple options to go, no go, and then weigh expenditures. But I thought that to prepare ourselves to get the best product that we can, hopefully that number is big. That would be this is the number that you compare us to now that all the information is in, like we did with this project. We need to find some money. So this chart recommends how you shift funds around to get the extra $1.378 million that fiscal year 21 seeks for the Aquatic Center. So here's the list. These are allocated projects in one fund or another that we say cancel or use the residual funds. So the project is done and there's a little money to scoot over. We scoot it into this project and then close that project out. So the first project we recommend to close is the Marina project. We didn't get started on that. We were going to add additional wet slips, and we budgeted $500,000 for that. Number 2, the Sleepy Hollow irrigation system has $50,000 left. So that was a project we completed, but there's money left over. Pat Thomas renovation, $35,000. We would recommend canceling that. ADA improvements, we program typically $50,000 every year. Some of it we spend, some of it we don't. This allocation for this year, we would recommend not doing it in 20 and shifting that money to the pool. You also put $100,000 towards the homeless. I would recommend you close that allocation out and put it on the pool. The last 2 are, we have $217,000 in recreation impact fees that you can use. And then the last thing is go hit the cash from the fiber sale at the amount of $426,000. By the way, we'll talk about that in a second. You have about $1.35 million left from the fiber sale alone. On those cash levels, they still feel pretty good, so I think that using these funds to pay this off is a good thing. Now, I get crazy complicated because until that number comes in and until a couple other projects are done, which I'll talk about in a second, there's still multiple options for other shell games. And the big one is we're getting ready to build the boardwalks out here on Venetian Isles, or Venetian Gardens here. We have about $1.6 million of funds accumulated for that. $600,000 from the county. I think we have $400,000 from Fish and Wildlife. And then the rest of that money is city money, general fund money that we already stuck in there. Now we're obligated to spend a couple of bucks, but we're in the process where we think that project is going to be about 1.2 million. And if that's the case, you're probably going to have another 300 or 350, maybe even 400 left over. We'll know more about that in the coming days, but we'll know where that's at before we need to start spending significant funds here. So I think you could probably say, okay, let's set this up, let's go out to bid, this is the fallback plan, and then hopefully that 400 that I'm saying take from fiber can stay in the fiber proceeds, and then you can grab that cash over from the docks. But that's not the conservative approach yet. Maybe December, January, we'll have the answer to that. So that's project number 1 for fiscal year 21. Project number 2 is to design the 2nd and 4th Street pedestrian plazas designed, which was the concept to go from the library to City Hall, close Market Street, and put the plazas in at 2nd and 4th Street. We estimated that construction project was $5 to $7 million, depending on how crazy, how big we get. But what we're saying is we have about $512,000 in reserves in the downtown CRA and use that allocation for the design. Then the final big project for 21 is Canal and Dixie, which is $100,000 in design to do the Canal-Dixie intersection, which takes into account how we finish off the Venetian Isles, the lakefront branding, the other concepts that you have some money stashed away. I think you have 75 for the signage and those type of things. So before we started getting into designing the entryway into this facility, we thought it'd be best to merge that concept with how we do a Canal and Dixie gateway, which was one of the recommendations that came out of the Main Street concept. So before I let you go and start talking about priorities and your opinions on where we need to go, future CIPs, let me just remind you of some of the existing big CIPs that are still on the books that we haven't quite finished off. So first is the Teen Center. That has a conglomerate. So on the chart here, you have the project, you have the source of how we funded it, and then the amount that's available. So we have the Teen Center project funded with general fund cash, Carver Heights CRA, hopefully a Boys and Girls Club contribution, and CDBG funds. Add all those up, you got about 2.6 million. We're still working on the Morris House reconstruction, so that's the big project. That's all insurance proceeds. That's 1.7 million. So that's an in and out number for us. You'll see it come in the budget, you'll see it go right back out, but it's insurance proceeds, so it really doesn't impact our bottom line until your insurance rate change. But that shouldn't be huge, hopefully. Then you have the Venetian Gardens dock, so we just talked about that in detail. 3 sources of money there were the Fish and Wildlife, the tourist money from the county, and the general fund. We have 1.64 million squirreled away for that, hoping that's going to come in about 1.2, 1.3. Then we have the community, I call this the community building punch list that you all approved, the skirt around the parapet wall, you approved the sign, you approved the cart path, and then you put on hold a couple other things, and you gave us 114 for that. You said, you did not do the sound panels, and I think I think it was the sign that you said, here's some money, but don't do it yet.
Fence.
Yeah, and you said don't do the fence. So from that, 114 is left. So we've still got some things to work out and do the punch list. The basketball court playground improvements at Sleepy Hollow Sports Complex, DST money, 125. In fact, I think that's on your agenda to review on Monday. and the concession stand improvements, which we're not quite there yet, which we put 100,000 to. So between these ongoing projects and these future projects, I think we have our hands full, and so looking at other projects right now beyond this is difficult. Any questions on that?
Is this the time to talk about rails to trails?
Yes. And on that note, Rails to Trails, we already have, I didn't put it on the list, we already have an allocation from fiscal year 19 or 20, and this fiscal year, we put 25,000 into Rails to Trails, which is sitting there. And so if you want to pledge 25,000 bucks for Rails to Trails, you already did it.
Yeah, I think the request is 50, but I mean, I don't know where the commission stands on that. I don't know what other cities are doing either. I understand the majority of the municipalities are contributing. I don't know if we know their dollar amounts or not.
If you want to go to 50, I would go back to this reallocation. I would go back to the homeless allocation, and instead of putting 100 towards the swimming pool, I would put 75 towards the swimming pool and see where the bids go on the swimming pool.
I actually would like to see what the other cities bid on this, because Leesburg doesn't have, we were always ahead of the Rails to Trails, but we still have to connect to the major state ones and the Wakiva Trail, which will eventually come through Tavares, and not the Tavares-Leesburg Trail. But I actually would like to see that kept at 25,000 until we see what the other cities are doing in the county. They have a definite liability there.
Danielle is here. Do you happen to know those numbers?
I don't know.
Okay. Okay, I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
I can try to get that information real quick if she's available.
My understanding is that the other cities are all going through the same process, so it's
Okay.
not all of, like, there might be one or two available, but not all available, because it's the same thing. But it's also kind of told me that, well, we're asking for 50, but it doesn't have to be.
Right.
Okay, so my question is this, are we giving Leesburg dollars to Lake County Rails and Trail? What Rails and Trails? 'Cause I don't have a presentation in front of me.
Commissioner, I'm not sure how that one works yet. This kind of the county had talked about this stuff. I know Sandy Moore talked to me a little bit about it. So I think I think what the effort that's going on right now is a county-led effort to get everybody to contribute to invest in Rails to Trails countywide.
And I know
Other
that,
than saying that, I can't explain any of the details.
But all we're doing, make sure I understand, all we're doing is setting it in the budget, and then they would have to come and we would have to approve some actually what we're going to spend it on specifically, right?
Correct.
Right. And so I think what you can say is, we got 25 grand, it's stashed away.
Just leave it at the 25 grand, please.
And
Because if the other cities aren't going to be paying and the county isn't, and we're not going to get the results that we should as Leesburg, because we already were ahead of everybody else, we shouldn't be supplementing their rails to trails in the other towns and cities. I mean, I realize how important it is to hook up to the state trails and everything else, and it's an economic development thing, but until the county decides what they're doing, such as, for example, the homeless, that we put the money aside, but nobody else seems to have done that, and they started nothing on that this year. I think 25 will cover us until something actually comes along. So please don't increase that amount.
Well, I think we have some awesome trails in Leesburg, and I would like to see us put $25,000 in what we already have, because I use the trails, and I think the staff is doing a good job maintaining them, keeping them cut, but I still think there are some other funds that we can put in our own trails. If you haven't walked the trails, walk the trails. Sometimes it does get littered, so we're going to invest $25,000. I think we need to give our staff $25,000 to make sure that the Leesburg trails that the residents use right now are being maintained and also improved every year to make them better, because there's a lot of activity on the trails. And I know there's a lot of people put negativity, but my wife walks, I walk the trails, and folk that I see walk on a regular basis. So I think that, we need to also put money in what we already have. So I told Al how nice the trail looks. The grass is maintained. It looks like a park atmosphere. And I would just hate for us to lose sight there. I think Leesburg, as the mayor's already said, we have some awesome trails, and I would encourage you to walk those trails and ride your bike, because I think Leesburg years ago, we did a great job buying the rail trail, the rail bed, and it was kind of controversial then, but I think we have a nice long trail system that connects our neighborhood. So I would like to see us, instead of just giving 25,000 or 50,000 to the county, give the staff 25,000 to go and spruce up even more the trails that we already have.
And I would say that I agree with those comments, but also I'm a little hesitant to spend too much money in design right now, because I think Leesburg's biggest opportunity is going to be hooking into the villages part of Leesburg, because the villages have always built out their own trail system, but Sumter County will not participate. So we've never had the option of doing that. Well, but since this is going to be in Lake County, we'll actually be able to connect there, and then you have the ability for villagers to ride into Leesburg, who they will be Leesburg residents. So I think that makes a lot of sense, but that can't be planned yet because that community doesn't exist.
I agree. I think for Leesburg, unless, I think if you marry Commissioner Christian's and Commissioner Roebuck's comments together, $25,000 on existing improvements to existing trails, and then I think that what will make Leesburg trails the greatest is not east to west traffic, but west to east. But you know, whether you go 25 or you kick it up to the 50, you're not talking about significant dollars. So to bring this portion of the meeting to closure, what I would like to do is, it seems like the consensus is this plan is acceptable. So Brandy has been shifting numbers for about 90 days. As we've gone through the design process of the pool, I've gotten even grayer and trying to figure out how we're going to shift monies around and which we're doing. And we've probably done this task internally 1,000 times. And so what we'd like to do is get this to the commission, have you guys memorialize it by a resolution so Brandy can get all the books updated. So that probably won't be the 13th, but it'll be coming shortly. And that will give more time to talk about rails to trails and formalize how we're shifting projects to get the pool project complete.
Is the $400,000 for median, is that a grant? Is that what's on here?
The median, I kicked that out to, that's not budgeted. Probably, if it's in that chart, and that was why we wanted to get this 21 done. There's some 22 and 23 projects. So what we'll do is when you see those projects, you'll see a better existing chart, 21 chart, and future chart, and we'll retitle all the projects. So you'll have a long-term capital project plan, but it will be updated and a lot easier to read because we've been shifting stuff all over the place.
That sounds like a good idea.
So, one last item on CIPs is, let's go back and review our pay-to-go-ish plan. We started out several years ago with we wanted to do a bunch of things. We didn't want to go into debt to get them done, and we came up with this great pay-as-you-go plan. So here's where we're at. We've always said you've got a little bit of cash in the general fund. We sold the fiber system, we put some other stuff together, and we created that CIP fund allocations where we can do these big capital projects with cash. So our fiscal year ending balance in the general fund is $11 million. Our GFO recommended fund balance is supposed to be around 4.8. We're recommending on a staff level that you keep it higher than that and keep about 7.5 million in cash. So that difference is about 3.5 million. Right now, the remaining fiber fund proceeds is 1.345 million. If you take out 426,000 for getting the pool project up to the $5 million mark, the fiber money proceeds will have about 920,000 left. So that gives you the ability to put together about 4.4 million in cash. I'm not saying go spend that. We've had that sitting around now for what, three years or so, and so I think we've managed that pretty well. So long term for Leesburg, My goal for you, the commission has been to take this cash and hopefully marry it with our enterprise funds, with the solid waste fund and the gas fund, especially as the gas fund grows with the village's gas deal. Hopefully in 3-4 years, we'll see some nice annual returning cash levels from those enterprise funds that can ultimately be reinvested in Leesburg. That is the CIP portion of the project, the program. Okay, so moving into the enterprise funds. First is water. DC Modeling, this is his honor to do his last budget workshop with us before he moves off to greener pastures. You can stand up here with me or sit in the hot seat. Brandy and I got so busy with the CRAs and getting that in a format that everybody could understand. Probably lean on DC here a little bit to review some of the details of the water, sewer, and all the other stuff. And I left a slide in there so you can witness how me and DC have argued over the past 7 years about how we disseminate information to the commission. I thought that would be fun for him to go through one last time and see how DC and I have interacted for the last 7 years. Okay, so in any case, to cut to the chase, water. The first one is our residential water rate chart that we show. We always want to be competitive, just like with electric and gas and all those other things. Our typical water bill runs from 3,000 to 7,500 gallons, from 12 to 22 bucks. And basically what this chart shows you is we've got an extremely competitive water rate. Commercial rates, 50,000, 150,000 gallons. These two columns is the typical. The average is 250, 740 for those two different services. Our rate is 100 bucks and 275. So we are extremely competitive in our commercial water rates. So having said that, the water fund's about $11 million in revenue. And we break it down into these categories: administrative treatment, reuse, distribution, other, capital, and they break down this way. So we generally, pretty much everything is SOP, and these were the projects that the Public Works Department has picked out as the ones that we need to focus on in terms of capital. The Spring Creek reuse extension, Cottonwood line replacement, Treadway School Loop, West Side line replacement, the elevated storage tank rehabilitation and inspection, which is an annual deal, the typical well rehabilitations we do, and then just typical replacements at the water treatment facilities. Our cash levels there are still pretty good. We've run from a low of about 8 to 12 million, so we're staying in that window, which is about 6 million over our requirement. So our cash levels in the water fund are reasonable. DC, do you want to mention anything in particular that I went too fast through?
Hey, DC Al, I know we got the Treadway School Loop. Is there any expansion of water near 44? Any new development going on, like towards Eustis area, behind the mall?
The Treadway, there is a little bit, but it's to the west.
Okay.
Sort of north of Silver Lake in that area.
Okay.
This Treadway project will create a loop so that we can feed from, and when we have trouble on Radio Road, for example, and up toward Treadway, if that main breaks, then we end up with 500 to 700 customers, houses out of water every time we have a break. So what this will do is it'll create a loop that'll feed from two directions and allow us to control those breaks and minimize the number of people that get impacted when we do have a break on Radio Road or on 473. So we get a loop, and that's the main motivation for doing this project.
Okay. All right. I get a call every day.
But the extensions of the system, there's an extension going up Radio Road farther north to the development that's between Radio Road and County Road 44.
Okay.
It is going to extend up through there a little bit. And then the wastewater line is coming down County Road 44.
Okay, all right, thanks, DC.
On the impact fees, both commercial and residential for water and wastewater, they up a lot. Is that specific projects or general growth?
In terms of the revenue that's
Yeah,
come-
the revenue.
Yeah, it's mostly the increase in development. The water impact fee is about 11, I think it's 1187 for each residential unit, and the wastewater impact fee is 2786, I think, for each residential unit. So those impact fees have come in, and as the builders are getting their permits, we've just seen an increase in those fees. We've also had some commercial stuff. The hotel on Dixie, that those impact fees are coming in. So it's primarily just kind of things are starting to go again.
Okay. And then there was a big jump in municipal sales for charges for service. Is that the city, or do I not?
Yeah, I guess it could be.
Not wastewater.
I'm on water.
Yeah, so we've got like irrigation lines that have gone in when we've done the landscaping projects.
Okay.
There have been a couple of other projects that have increased what we're using as a city.
Okay. And then what are the $50,000 of promotional activities in the water fund?
So there's we talked about this last year about establishing a water conservation incentive program.
That's right, I remember.
We actually have that an item on the agenda for the next Monday night that will outline that program for you. And if you approve that item, then this provides the funding for that incentive program.
Okay. And then it looks like we're picking up an admin services coordinator and what was it, maybe an inspector of some sort they were splitting?
We're reclassifying two existing positions. One of them is coming from a wastewater treatment plant operator position that we're converting to an inspector position. Again, because of the development and the things that are going on, our single inspector has gotten to the point where we just need more help inspecting. The other position is a maintenance worker position that we're reclassifying to help as sort of a customer service type function in our collection and distribution office, where we handle, we get a lot of calls and the office folks there just need more administrative help, and this person can help in things like doing boil water notices and a number of other items that will help actually provide better customer service for us. Somebody calls and says, I've got a problem with my there's something going on out in the road. There's water coming everywhere. We need somebody to track that down. This person can help coordinate all the work that goes on when those calls come in.
Okay, that makes sense. And then it seems like we're losing an operator at the Turnpike plant. We're going down one. Is that?
It's a position. It is a position. Our permit has changed in terms of the staffing requirements, and so we've taken that position, and that's where that's either, and I don't remember whether it's the inspector or the customer service person, but that's one of the positions.
Okay. It seems like you're doing a lot of growth without adding people, which is good, but they can handle that?
Yeah, we're not.
Okay.
We've actually, because of I think the success at both of our plants and the way we've operated, we've got a really good relationship with DEP, and the staffing and reporting requirements have been eased over the years, and we're just going to take that position and use it in a place where we think it's more effective.
Okay. Thank you.
I have a question that has nothing at all to do with Leesburg. Where does Astatula get their water since there's no water service? Are they totally on wells?
I don't know.
Okay. Whoever put this report together, why doesn't Astatula have water?
I think it is, I think they are on wells.
I think so
That's
too.
your, that's your last task, DC. That's your last task.
Oh,
Find
you
out.
let me down.
Okay.
In fact, I'm sure.
Okay, any other discussion?
Well, I can't believe I'm gonna say this, but, our rates are so low. Should they be looked at?
Okay.
Well, I'm just saying, there's so much pressure on electric rates.
I don't
just
get any
didn't-
breaks from the utilities in Leesburg, and don't touch my water.
Well, let me,
I wasn't gonna say it. I mean, we're,
well, let me
we're the bottom.
I don't know that this is one of those uncoordinated
You get-
responses, but
You get 8 hours of work time dispensation to give your unfiltered opinion.
I think you probably are aware, but in case you're not, your water rate structure is tiered in 5 different tiers. And we actually have sort of a dual standard within the city, particularly with regard to the folks that are at Royal Highlands, because when they're they have their own separate allocation, and back when we were getting our permit back in 2009, there was some difficulty there with them living within their allocation, and so their fee structure, rate structure is different than the rest of Leesburg, and it was established primarily at the direction of the St. John's Water Management District, and it was designed to encourage those folks to live within their allocation. As we grow as a city, and as we add more and more people, our allocation does not, our St. John's allocation does not increase from 2020 to 2030. So we're going to have more people, and we're going to have the same allocation. And I think there will come a time down the road where you're going to want to look at your fee structure as a means of managing the use within your allocation. I do think that's coming.
Okay.
And
Thank you, DC. I don't feel so stupid about my question now.
There's more to that answer. Now, I can start talking too.
I would agree. The commercial especially, that's the one you're looking at, right, Mike? The commercial where we're like half the closest competitor or something like that?
Actually, I look
Maybe
at both,
40%,
and
okay.
we're either the minimum or way below average, and I was just
I
saying-
think that statement there matches pretty much exactly what DC was saying. So the concept is to do a rate study and a recalibration of the rates that changes the rate structure within all the categories, and it's not a rate increase because it generates the same $11 million. This study was done, don't hold me to this, but I want to say Ray Sharp started it, or did you start that?
I didn't start it, but this was part of a refinancing in 2012 or 13,
This was like
I think.
month 2 for
14.
me on the job.
Right.
Back in early 14 when DC and Bill Spinelli beat me up and dragged me into the second floor conference room with the consultants who said that we needed to change the structure. I think Jim was in on that meeting then too, who did a study on you got to change rate structure. And it was actually not going to be an increase for residential, but it was going to be an increase for commercial-ish because the whole thing needed to get redone. And at that time, frankly, I scuttled the ship and said, it's just too complicated. It's going to bring in the same revenue. We don't need to do it. That was 7 years ago. Because of some of the growth now that we are starting to see, it's probably something that we might want to dust off and think about.
And let me qualify my question. I wasn't advocating a tax increase or rate increase to the citizens. Where I was going with that was with all the pressure on electric rates. I didn't know I was thinking more big picture. Was there a way to maybe bump these a little bit in an effort to help us keep our electric rates down? That's where I was going. It's just,
I think there's two things, though, that make pressure on electric rates and pressure on water rates different.
okay.
And just real brief, but this isn't important, because,
No,
so
and
that's
I'm
why.
still learning too, so that's why I'm asking.
Yeah, that's why you see me get all crazy about electric rates and not so crazy about electric or water rates. Electric rates, I think there's a lot of undercurrent of political pressure that as the industry has changed, capacity is not being sold as much, and the areas being totally, every square inch being regulated, and then having the Public Service Commission over the IOUs and the competition. I think there's a natural competition and a force from FPL and some of the larger IOUs to start snatching up existing pieces of pie. So they start picking on munis and getting munis to sell.
Yeah, and you've
because
educated
they're
me
not
on, yeah.
competitive.
And you've educated me on this, which is why I'm so sensitive to electric rates.
So on that one, regionally we're pretty good. We don't have too much issue there, and that's why I think that's really important. On the other side of the equation is the water, and on water, the pressure on having a good water rate, I think is going to be it's more punitive. Water is more environmentally centric as far as the rate structure goes, and structures are set up so that the more water you use, the more you pay, therefore you won't use as much water. And that we don't have the over regulated or over competitive industry where we're not competing with anybody. I mean, we're not competing with Apopka Water Authority, or we're not competing with Claremont. You know, we draw our little 180s and everybody stays in there and everybody behaves, because we're all municipals and we're all friends and we're pretty much in the same business, and we don't have that private sector competition that is injected into our business. That doesn't mean we're not effective or efficient or providing good service, but it drives the rates. So we're getting it. So in that respect, because the general fund isn't a huge major relier on water transfers, and because we're getting capital things done and our system is in good shape relatively, I don't think you need to increase your water rate so much. I think that's going to become an issue as growth comes, and you may need to look at the next water treatment facility, expand your CUP, and fight those issues. So my recommendation would be keep your powder dry, wait for those issues to come when something really serious has to happen, like the next huge bond issue to get another plant or to go off and expand your CUP. You didn't ask that question, but that's what you got.
No, I appreciate all this. I'm just going to ask DC one more question. Do you have concerns over our allocation over the next 10 years? With the village's growth? You just referred to our allocation over the next 10 years? I know it's a loaded question, but
the challenge with the question is that we talk to so many people who are asking, do you have water for me, for my development, when in fact the reality is, because of financial or whatever, that development never ever really comes into the system. So I've mentioned this to Al. We've had more people ask, do you have water for me, than we have available water. That's all. We passed that, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 months ago, because all these people are coming in and talking, do you have water? And the answer is, today we have about 1.5 million gallons a day of excess water, and not excess, but available capacity.
Yeah, I understand.
And that's a really good thing. But we've probably had 2.5 million gallons a day of folks coming in saying, do you have water for me? So it's down the road at some point, if all these things keep going, if everything keeps building, then I think, there will come a time when we're up against our allocation, and somebody's going to want to build something, and we're going to have to figure out a way to say, we've got water for you. And that's when I think you get into the issue of making the rate structure so that it encourages water conservation. We have the St. John's, the folks who allocate water, for them a rule of thumb is about 150 gallons per person per day. And we have communities that are right now using more than 200 gallons per person per day. And sometime down the road, we're going to need that water back from those folks. And the easiest way is to manage it through the rate structure, because folks, I mean, we can talk about, you know, turn the water off when you're brushing your teeth or whatever. Conservation will nibble at the edges. The incentive program where we're encourage people to use low flow fixtures and toilets that don't use 5 gallons every time you flush it. Those kinds of things are good things, but they're going to have a small impact. The big impact, like we found out with Royal Highlands, is if those third and fourth tier rate structure discourages getting into those levels of use, then the water usage goes down.
Thank you, DC. That helped me a lot.
Two follow-up questions there. So $1.5 million is what we have. When you say we ran out, how many houses roughly does that get you?
Well, if you figure that 150 gallons per person, so you're looking at 300 gallons per home. So whatever that math is, what is that, about 20,000 homes at $1.5 million gallons?
And that number ranges a reuse house versus a non-reuse house. So that spread could be anywhere from 10 to 25,000.
Yeah, Commissioner Dennison in her house, because she has reuse, she probably uses 100 gallons a day inside, and then she would use that other 200 gallons a day of reuse water outside on her yard. Whereas somebody in Plantation, for example, where there is no reuse, they're using 300 or actually closer to 400 gallons a day potable water. Most of it is going on their yard.
Right, but that doesn't include the villages development, right? Because don't they have their own CUP?
The villages development when we sold them the North Sprayfield property, we removed that area from our service area. And it does not include, our allocation does not include the water that they're going to use in that development.
Yeah, so, and I don't disagree with the idea of anything you said, but I also think the idea of 20,000 homes coming to Leesburg minus the villages in the next 10 years, as much as I would love to see it, certainly, that's a pace we've never seen. I mean, that's almost, you know, like villages type pace for the whole development. But then also, what is our split roughly between commercial and residential in terms of usage? Do you know?
No, I don't.
Okay.
Shall we talk about wastewater now? Wastewater, very similar. The next 18 months or so in wastewater will really be a focus on the Turnpike expansion plant. So we've got lots of numbers that are married in there. Our wastewater rates maybe a little closer to market than water, which is our residential, about, you know, running between 30 and 33, and the average is 30 to 37. Commercial, pretty much right on target there. 325, 770 versus 290, 660. The total wastewater budget, about 16.8 million. It broke down in these categories: administration, canal treatment plant, turnpike treatment plant, laboratory spray field. The court spray field is no longer. Collections, lift station, other, and then capital. And then we break down our capital expenses in this manner for next year. About 1.4 only for the turnpike expansion. That'll be coming incrementally. Moving some lines, the Venetian Center upgrade, which to change the structure of the system that serves the Marriott and that development there, that's $750,000. And then kind of those are the capital new things, and then just the standard things in this column with some field sampler, 6,000, tool, 76, fixing pumps, 60 grand, discharge replacement pipes, 50 grand, fixing clay pipe, 100 grand, and then some typical improvements at the Canal Street plant. So all these capital improvements total about 2.2 million. And then you see our cash position here, which does not include the note that we just did, which helps us. So essentially we've got 3 or 4 major big deals going on with the village, with the expansion of the Turnpike plant. That expenditure in the neighborhood of 22 million is where we're looking at. The 441 widening project, if that doesn't or doesn't come a $6 million project, that's in out years. The Venetian Isles project really can go from that 770 number to 1.5, depending on how we pipe it. So part of that whole cash flow was to get that low interest loan, which is paid for with the incremental growth coming in from the treatment plant, the bulk treatment deal. You saw a dink of about 600,000 in revenues there, which is all associated with the village's bulk contracts. So that at 50,000 feet is the wastewater budget. All right, well, we'll move along. Solid waste. Solid waste is another one of our very positive cash flow funds. Then, as you see it with the community grants and those type of things, they provide good service, nice return, but nothing major in this fund to speak of. And rate stays the same. We keep collecting the solid waste, take it to Cavanna, they make energy, you make a couple of bucks, and we fund community projects. Stormwater is the stormwater fee, which breaks down into the targeted projects that DC's picked out: curb and gutter maintenance, stock subdivision improvement, 150. Stock subdivision again, 110. One was at Crest and Flamingo. This is warehouse and Flamingo. Lake Robin Hood improvements, 25,000, and the post office project north of 44, 230. And those are. We don't do that by assessment, do we? That's billed monthly. Any questions in stormwater? And by the way, I hope everybody's going by Lake Lorraine. It looks really awesome. And then fleet service. So we talked a little bit about fleet service last night with changing the contribution down to 75% versus 100%. Total fleet budget, about 3.9 million. And then the most important part about the fleet fund is what vehicles we plan to purchase. So the list goes a bucket truck, 7 total, so 375, 7 total cars for the police department, 315, a fire generator, 14,000, in water we have a mini excavator and 2 trucks at 168. Wastewater, again, a mini excavator, a mower, and an SUV at 92.5. Solid waste has one van. Stormwater has the new sweeper, a truck and a mower at 344.5. Public Works Grounds has 2 new trucks at 93. And Recreation has an ATV and a mower at 48, for a total out of about 1.5 million. And remember, every year we evaluate the vehicle replacement schedule or new vehicle replacement schedule based on the checklist that he has. And what is it, when you hit a 39, that's the ticket for a replacement.
Al, can you, DC, update me on a solid waste van for $90,000? Was that a specialized van or something?
It's not what you would look at, it's not like a caravan utility van. It's a large panel truck van that we use to haul around containers and
The
stuff.
garbage cans?
Sir?
The garbage cans?
Yes.
Okay.
I figured it was an RV for DC's retirement.
$90,000, man.
Yeah.
That's a nice van. Carrying garbage cans.
And in the spirit of full disclosure, the chart that DC begged me to take out that I didn't take out, this chart demonstrates, this is what we do. We do this process every year. And this is why I wanted to put it in here, because DC's right, because he always comes into my office in budget time with his hair on fire saying there's not enough fleet money, there's too many requests, you can't lower the lease amount, we need all that money. And I say, no, we'll figure it out. And then he comes back in and tells me in a couple of months later, after his hair goes on fire, and he yells at me for letting the fleet fund grow. I'm like, well, like 3 months ago you were yelling at me because I cut it, and now you're yelling at me because I let it grow. So, but here's what this chart shows. I'll tell you why DC didn't want me to put it in, and then I'll tell you why I didn't matter and I put it in anyway. The red line represents how much all the leases are that when we remember we talked about this real quick last time. We do the depreciated value on every vehicle. Over time, it comes up to X. X is assigned to that department, and then add up all the X's in each department, and that becomes their lease payment. Add all those lease payments together. At 100% of depreciated value, we collect about $1.5 million. That number's changed. So and then what this showed was, this is about where I was hired by the city. I think we were down at 50%. That was kind of coming out of the end of the bad times, so we whacked the leases to save everybody money. And what then you see is the fund balance when we whacked the lease payment went up because the red line shows we didn't buy anything. So blue line shows how much money we're throwing into the pot. Green line shows what the fund balance is, and red line shows what we're going to buy. So once we get past this line right here, which is fiscal year 21, we assume a 75% lease payment into the fund, and we assume what the requests of purchases are. And if these numbers don't mix, your reserve number goes down. So DC said, don't put this chart in because this line's not adjusted, and we haven't put all the requests in. We got to tighten that up, and it's already tanking. So don't show the commission this. And I said, I'm going to put it in here anyway. Here's why. If I showed you this chart as we've done for the last 7 years, this green line always trails off every single year, about 1, 2, 3, 4 years out. And what we do every year is if we see this green line tanking, which is your cash, we say, we're not going to let the red line grow, and then we let the blue line grow, and then this crash gets kicked out year after year after year after year. So if I showed you this chart from 7 years ago, it would look pretty much just like that one, which means that DC and I think, have done a good job of managing your cash in the fleet fund. Mostly DC. Would you disagree with that?
That was painful.
Sounds like DC did a good job managing the cash, and you've done a bad job forecasting. Is that?
And that's the fleet fund. Any questions there? So that covers this evening, unless you all have any other questions. We'll reconvene. Of course, we have, remember, we have our shade meeting to discuss collective bargaining at 5 o'clock. on Monday, then followed up by a regular meeting at 5:30, and then we're back one more time on Tuesday at 5:30 to talk about the electric fund, the gas fund, the healthcare fund, and the pensions and all that fun stuff. So I think we can get you out of here pretty quick on Tuesday.
Al, I got one last question. I was late to the first meeting, late tonight too, apologize. But looking in the budget, is there a cost of living increase for the employees in this budget?
I put 3% in.
Okay. Thank you, sir. That's all I had.
That it?
That's it.
We are adjourned.
20,000 houses to get some wood built.